Bienvenidos. Today we're going to talk about preterite verbs. Preterite verbs are verbs in Spanish that are conjugated in the preterite tense, which means they're conjugated in the past tense. Present tense deals with things that are happening now. Preterite tense deals with things that happened, that are over with, that happened in the past. And when we conjugate verbs in the preterite tense, we just have to change the endings to match the pronoun, the subject pronoun or the subject of the sentence, just like we did in the present tense. But in the preterite tense, the endings are different. And so on the board here, I have written several AR, ER, and IR verbs that are conjugated in the preterite tense, so we can see what the endings look like. Hablar. Yo hablé. This means I talked. Okay? So we know how to say I talk. Now we know how to say I talked. Yo hablé. Tú hablaste. You talked. Él habló. He talked. Nosotros hablamos. We talked. Ellos hablaron. They talked. For comer, we have yo comí. I ate. Tú comiste. You ate. Él comió, he ate. Nosotros comimos, we ate. Ellos comieron, they ate. Salir. Yo salí, I left. Tú saliste, you left. Él salió, he left. Nosotros salimos, they left. Ellos salieron, oh, they left. Oh, this is we left, sorry. Nosotros salimos, we left. Ellos salieron, they left. Okay? So these are the regular endings for regular preterite verbs. Just like in the present tense, we have irregular verbs and verbs that have different spellings depending on the conjugation. There are some verbs like that in the preterite that we'll learn in a different podcast. But in this video, we're talking about regular ER, AR, and IR verbs in the preterite tense. And some things that we need to pay attention to are how these are spelled. Because as you can see, we have accent marks on several of the forms. Which forms all have accent marks? The yo form, okay. The él, usted, ella form. All have accent marks on the end. Another thing we need to notice is the nosotros form for the AR verbs is identical to the nosotros form in the present tense. So the way we tell if we're talking about preterite or present tense is by the context of the sentence. So it's spelled exactly like the present tense. And for IR verbs, the same thing, spelled just like the present tense. Now, for ER and IR verbs in the preterite, they all have identical endings, okay? Comí, salí. Comiste, saliste. Comió, salió. Comimos, salimos. Comieron, salieron. They're identical. So ER and IR, regular verbs in the preterite tense, identical endings. So we have iste, yo, imos, ieron. Those are the endings for ER and IR verbs. For AR verbs, we have haste, o, amos, aron. Okay? Now, for stem changing verbs in the present tense, some of them are just regular in the preterite tense. AR and ER verbs that are stem changers in the present tense just don't stem change and they're just normal in the preterite tense. So I have two examples here. Encontrar, which is a U-E stem changer, and perder, which is an I-E stem changer. Both of those are regular in the preterite tense. And if you look at the way that they're conjugated here, stand back. Encontrar is an AR verb, and the stem just stays encont. No stem change in the preterite tense. So we have encontré, encontraste, encontró, encontramos, encontraron. And for perder, perdí, perdiste, perdió, perdimos, perdieron. No stem change in the preterite tense. That's for AR and ER verbs in the preterite. IR verbs are a different story, and that's going to be covered in another video. There are irregular verbs also in the preterite tense, and they will be covered in another video as well. Below here we have some words that can be red flags. Say, hey, I'm going to use the preterite tense in this sentence. Words like anoche, last night, ayer, yesterday, anteayer, the day before yesterday. You're talking about things that happened in the past. La semana pasada, last week. El año pasado, last year. La vez pasada, last time. De repente, suddenly. Acabar de, to have just finished doing something. Ya, already, and terminar, to finish. So these verbs right here aren't necessarily going to be conjugated in the preterite, but they actually can indicate the preterite tense. Let's give an example. Anoche comí con mi hermana. Anoche comí con mi hermana. Last night, I ate with my sister. Anoche means I did something in the past. Okay? Let's do another example. De repente, suddenly. De repente, suddenly, la niña salió del parque. De repente la niña salió del parque. Suddenly, the girl left the park. Okay? Let's do acabar de. Los estudiantes acabaron de tomar el examen. The students just finished taking the test. Okay? And let's do terminar. Let's do nosotros form. Terminamos. Terminamos con las clases anteayer. We finished the classes the day before yesterday. Okay? Let's see. Let's do a question. Ya means already. ¿Ya comiste? Have you already eaten? So these are some examples of the preterite tense, some examples of how to conjugate verbs in the preterite, and examples of words that can be red flags for the preterite tense.